I never realized a dream could feel both exhilarating and fragile, until the morning Ember and Bloom Bakery opened its doors. Standing in the warm glow of Willow Lane, with the scent of vanilla rising from the ovens, it felt like my entire life was hanging on one trembling breath. I'm Hannah Collins, 34, raised in a family where success had to be flashy to be real. My brother Ethan was the golden boy of Wall Street predictions. My sister Chloe's face was plastered on every digital ad within 50 miles, and my parents, Mark and Linda, praised them with a reverence usually reserved for Nobel Prize winners. And then there was me. Whenever someone asked what I did, my parents would force a polite smile and say, "Hannah is figuring out her path." The tone always implied that I had gotten lost somewhere and refused to ask for directions. Only my grandmother Eleanor ever made me feel seen. She taught me how to bake, guiding my tiny hands over dough and whispering, "You're not just baking, sweetheart. You're giving people a reason to smile." 7 years, that's how long it took me, 3 part-time jobs, late-night buses, and enough burned fingertips to lose count, before I could finally rent a tiny, battered storefront on Willow Lane. The place was dusty, leaky, a little crooked, but full of potential. I poured everything into it, my savings, my sleep, my heartbeat. I wasn't alone. Megan from the flower shop brought lavender bundles to brighten the counter. Ben from the secondhand bookstore spent weekends fixing shelves because books deserve dignity too. Piece by piece, the shop transformed until Ember and Bloom smelled like hope wearing an apron. The night before opening, I sat at the counter writing handwritten invitations to each member of my family. I baked a pastry tailored to each of them and tied it to their envelope. The Ethan espresso torte, the Chloe citrus glaze, Dad's maple walnut roll, his secret favorite, and for Mom, a delicate rosewater tart, crafted as precisely as she expected everything in life to be. I set them all carefully in the display case and placed a small wooden sign on the prettiest table by the window, reserved for family. Just writing those words made my chest tighten. Opening day felt like a movie montage. Bells chiming, neighbors cheering, a local blogger snapping photos, the scent of butter and sugar drifting into the street. Willow Lane came alive around me, but every time I passed the window, my eyes drifted to that table. 5 chairs, 5 untouched plates, 5 pastries sitting like little tributes waiting for someone to claim them. At 10 a.m., I told myself they were late. At 11, that maybe they wanted to surprise me. At noon, Megan squeezed my arm and whispered, "They'll come. Give it time." I nodded, because hope is sometimes easier than honesty. At 1 p.m., my phone buzzed. Chloe's Instagram story. A glass of champagne. Balloons. A giant banner. "Congrats, Chloe." Their smiles were wide. Their glasses raised. All 4 of them, my entire family, at a restaurant across town, celebrating her promotion. Not one of them had shown up for me. I swallowed hard and turned back to the counter just as a customer asked for a second slice of Eleanor's lemon pie. I smiled automatically, rang them up, thanked them. When people expect joy from you, you learn how to deliver it, even when something inside you is quietly breaking. But when the customer stepped away, I let myself glance back at the family table. The 5 pastries waited exactly as I'd arranged them. Perfect. Untouched. Each one labeled with the name of someone I loved, names of people who hadn't bothered to walk through the door. I told myself I was fine. That the packed bakery, the smiling neighbors, the warmth in the air, all of that was enough. But then the sunlight shifted, and in the reflection of the window, my own face appeared, hovering above those empty chairs, and it hit me with the quiet force of truth. I had built a place for my family, but they had never saved a place for me. Success didn't crash into my life like a celebration. It crept in softly, through warm smiles, packed mornings, handwritten notes slipped under the door, and a tiny headline in the Seattle local press calling Ember and Bloom Willow Lane's new heartbeat. Within days, my little bakery wasn't just a shop. It was a gathering place, humming with the quiet music of people who cared. I should have been fulfilled, but a small, stubborn corner of my heart still kept glancing at the door, imagining my family walking in and saying, "Hannah, We were wrong. Instead, the universe sent me someone far more unexpected. It happened on a slow Thursday afternoon. The bell chimed, and in walked Julia Hart. Yes, the Julia Hart. The woman whose masterclass I'd watched so many nights my laptop nearly overheated. She wore a navy peacoat and an expression like she'd come to evaluate a diamond. She ordered my lavender honey brioche. One bite. Pause. A smile that felt like a spotlight. "You made this dough by hand, didn't you?" "Yes," I managed. "You've mastered it. I want this in my next book." My legs actually wobbled. I imagined Mom hearing that, imagined Dad pretending not to be impressed, but secretly bragging. I imagined Ethan running numbers to prove how viable I'd suddenly become. It was the first time in years that hope didn't feel dangerous, but hope has sharp teeth. The next morning, before sunrise, I unlocked the bakery and turned on the lights, only to freeze. My entire family was already inside. Mom, Dad, Ethan, Chloe, sitting at the reserved-for-family table, the same table they'd left empty on opening day. "Morning," Chloe said with a tiny, guilty smile. What are you doing here?" I asked. Dad slid instantly into his CEO voice. "We need to talk about your future." Ethan opened his laptop like he was presenting quarterly earnings. 80% of small food businesses fail in the first year. The numbers don't lie. Mom folded her hands solemnly. "We want to protect you, sweetheart. You're not thinking long-term." "Protect me from what?" My voice trembled. "From succeeding?" Dad pushed a folder across the table. "We found a buyer. Pete's son, the one from my golf club, wants to turn this place into a gym coffee hybrid. He'll purchase all your equipment, your brand, your recipes." "My recipes?" I choked. Ethan nodded. "You'll be compensated fairly. Then you can move on to something more realistic." It hit me then. They weren't here to support me. They were here to shut me down, to clean up what they saw as the family's mistake. "I'm not selling," I whispered. Mom reached for my hand like I was misbehaving. "Honey, listen to reason. This is about our family's reputation." A sharp voice cut through the air. "Interesting," Julia Hart said as she stepped in. "Because Hannah is the only person in this room who knows what she's doing." My family spun around, stunned. Behind Julia stood Megan, Ben, and several regular customers holding early morning coffees. They froze at the tension but didn't step back. They stood with me. Dad straightened. "This is a private matter." "No," I said quietly. "It's not." My voice didn't shake for once. "You call yourselves my family, but you weren't here on opening day. You weren't here any morning at 4 a.m. These people were. They showed up. You didn't." Mom's eyes hardened. "We're trying to help you." "Help?" I swallowed hard. "You came here to erase everything I've built." The words rose on their own. "You're my relatives, not my family. Family doesn't ambush you with a buyout offer at dawn." Silence filled every corner. "Please leave," I said. Dad muttered something about immaturity. Ethan snapped his laptop shut. Chloe lingered, eyes wet with something like guilt, but followed them out. The moment the door closed, everyone congratulated me, hugged me, called me brave. But bravery doesn't numb the sting. For the first time since opening Ember and Bloom, the warm sweetness in the air felt thinner, as if something inside me had cracked quietly, and no amount of sugar could cover it. After the confrontation with my family, the bakery stayed busy. But inside me, something emptied out. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly, stopped trusting the steady rhythm of my own hands. Every morning, when I tried to knead dough, my fingers trembled. When customers complimented my pastries, I smiled, but their words slid off me like water on glass. And in the quiet hours before dawn, my parents' voices looped in my head. "This isn't a real career. You're being emotional. We're just trying to save you from yourself." It didn't matter that strangers loved my work. My family's doubt dug deeper. One morning, as I overmixed a batch of brioche, the dough tore apart like wet paper. Megan noticed first. "Hannah," she said softly, touching my shoulder, "you haven't looked yourself in days." Ben poked his head from the back. "Take a break, please, before you break." I wanted to insist I was fine. Instead, my throat closed. Tears spilled onto the counter before I even realized I was crying. "I'm slipping," I whispered. "They said I was unstable, and maybe they're right." Megan and Ben exchanged a glance, one of those silent conversations people have when they love you enough to tell you the truth. "We're closing the shop for today," Megan said firmly. "No arguments," Ben added. "Go home. Rest." Walking back to my apartment felt like trudging through mud. The walls seemed smaller than I remembered. The air felt stale, thick, unmoving. I sat on the floor of my tiny living room, hugging my knees, when my phone buzzed. It was Dorothy, a distant cousin I barely spoke to. "Hannah, I think you should know." Her voice trembled. "Your parents told the whole family you're having issues, that we shouldn't encourage your bakery." For a moment, I couldn't breathe, so it was true. They weren't just trying to take my dream, they were trying to poison it from a distance. After the call ended, a numbness washed over me. I wandered to my old dresser, opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years, and that's when I saw it. A faded lavender envelope tucked beneath a stack of scarves. My grandmother's handwriting, "For the day you doubt yourself." My fingers shook as I opened it. "Hannah," the letter began, "if you're reading this, life has thrown you into a storm." She wrote about the Collins family's obsession with logic, how their fear disguised itself as reason, how they'd always chase security, even at the cost of joy. "But you, EA," she wrote, "measure life differently. You measure it in smiles, community, and courage. Don't waste years translating your dreams into a language they can understand. Find the people who already understand you and build your family from them." I pressed the paper to my chest. I sobbed, loud, shaking, messy. But for the first time in days, the tears felt like release, not collapse. When I finally stood up, something inside me had shifted. I went to the kitchen cabinet where I kept the old recipe box she'd left me. The edges were worn, stained with butter and ink. I opened it gently, like uncovering a relic, flipping through her cards until one caught my eye. A half-finished tart she'd never perfected. Eleanor's Garden, a blend of citrus, herbs, and summer florals. Unfinished, untouched, just waiting. I felt the first real spark inside me since the bakery opened. "That's it," I whispered. "That's what I'm making." Not for customers, not for my parents, for her, for me, for the people who stayed. And as I preheated my tiny oven, I realized something simple but life-changing. Family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the people who hold you up when your blood turns against you. In the weeks after finding my grandmother's letter, something inside me steadied. I wasn't magically healed, but I could breathe again. I could knead dough without shaking. I could look at my reflection without flinching. And when I walked back into Ember and Bloom with my box of her old recipes, the whole street seemed to rise up around me. Janelle, the neighborhood blogger, wrote a full feature about my comeback. Julia Hart posted a photo of my Eleanor's Garden tart with the caption, "A masterpiece in the making." Willow Lane shop owners told the Fall Festival Committee that Ember and Bloom should be the centerpiece of the event. For the first time, I felt carried, not by blood, but by community. My family must have sensed it because their efforts to undermine me shifted into high gear. Dad showed up with a commercial real estate broker, loudly discussing lease reassignment paperwork, trying to intimidate me into signing. Mom called every relative, telling them I was mentally unstable and pleading with them not to encourage my delusion. Ethan and Chloe went one step further. They created something called the Collins Family Small Business Support Fund and applied to host a booth at the Fall Festival, directly next to mine. Directly, their glossy slogan, helping small businesses reset before they crash. It didn't take a genius to see who they were talking about. By the time Festival Day arrived, Willow Lane glittered with lanterns, pumpkins, and amber lights. I set up my display early. Rows of Eleanor's Garden tarts, each topped with thin ribbons of candied citrus and a small card sharing the story behind the recipe. My grandmother's story. My story. The bakery regulars gathered around first. Then Julia Hart swept in wearing a wool coat and bright red lipstick. She tasted the tart, closed her eyes, and announced, "This belongs on a national stage." The crowd cheered. And that was when I heard my mother's voice from the next booth. "If you're running a business based purely on emotion," she said loudly to a cluster of visitors, "you're setting yourself up for failure. That's why our fund exists, to help people make rational decisions." Dad nodded gravely beside her. Ethan handed out pamphlets. Their banner fluttered above them like a warning label. People started whispering. Some glanced at me with sympathy, others with confusion. My stomach twisted, but before I could speak, a familiar voice sliced through the noise. "Stop!" It was Chloe. She stood in the middle of the walkway, her hair windblown, her face flushed. Not from embarrassment, but from something like determination. In her hands, a box of my Eleanor's garden tart. She looked at Mom first. "I can't do this anymore." Then, turning to the crowd, she raised her voice. "Hannah doesn't need to be rescued. She needs to be supported. This booth, this fund, isn't helping small businesses. It's trying to erase my sisters, and I won't be part of it." The crowd fell silent. I froze. Chloe walked straight to me, eyes shining. "I'm sorry," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I was so busy being the successful one that I didn't see how cruel we were being. "And I'm not happy, Hannah. Not even close." She unpinned the gold badge of the Collins Fund and let it drop onto the pavement. "Please," she whispered, "let me stand with you today." Then she did something I never expected. She tied on one of my Ember and Bloom aprons, right there in front of the whole neighborhood. A collective murmur spread through the crowd as people began filming, snapping photos. Janelle was already typing furiously for her blog. Within minutes, the Collins Fund booth was nearly empty. My booth overflowed. Chloe stood beside me for the rest of the afternoon, handing out samples and telling everyone, every single person, that the Eleanor's garden tart tasted like healing. For the first time, I felt something shift, not just in my business, but in my heart. Maybe blood couldn't be rewritten, but choices could. And that day, my sister chose me. After the fall festival, everything shifted faster than I could process. One moment, Chloe was standing beside me in an Ember and Bloom apron. The next, our story was everywhere. Blogs, local papers, even a short TV segment titled "The Bakery That Saved a Street," and a woman from her own family. It felt surreal watching strangers talk about my life on screen, but for the first time, the attention didn't scare me. It felt like protection. A week later, a boutique hotel chain reached out, asking if I'd consider supplying pastries for their Seattle locations. Julia Hart sent an email with the subject line, "3 recipes, 1 heart." Inside, she told me she was featuring my lavender brioche, my maple citrus knot, and Eleanor's garden tart in her new cookbook, along with a full-page dedication about a baker who turned resilience into flavor. I cried reading it. Not the broken kind of crying, the full, overflowing kind. With the influx of customers, we quickly ran out of space. Mr. Garrison, my landlord, knocked on my door one morning holding a ring of keys. "The print shop next door closed," he said. "Willow Lane thinks you should have it." Within weeks, Megan, Ben, and a handful of neighboring shop owners helped me transform the dusty space into a bright community room for workshops, events, and weekend classes. We painted the walls warm cream, hung dried lavender bundles from the rafters, and built long wooden tables that felt like invitations. Every morning felt like a sunrise I had baked myself. Chloe started showing up earlier and earlier, at first just to help during the rush, then to learn. She cut her hours at her marketing job and launched a blog called Runaway Baker, writing about burnout, healing, and what it meant to rebuild a sense of home from scratch. Each post ended with a photo of something we'd baked together and the caption, "Family you choose is still family." Her words healed places in me my parents never even noticed. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. One afternoon, someone walked quietly into the bakery. No fanfare, no attitude. Ethan. He hovered near the register, hands in his pockets. "Your numbers," he said, clearing his throat. "They don't make sense anymore." I tensed. He continued, "In a good way, I didn't account for community. or loyalty, or whatever this is." He gestured to the bustling room. "If it's okay, I'd like to come by sometimes, as a customer." It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. My parents didn't dare show up. They sent a message instead, asking if they could attend Julia's book launch event, which we were hosting at Ember and Bloom. I replied politely, "Unfortunately, the event is fully booked, but the bakery is open Tuesday through Sunday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You're welcome to visit as customers." No anger, just boundaries. And that was enough. The night of the book launch, the bakery glowed with soft lights and full hearts. The walls were lined with photos from the old kitchen where my grandmother first taught me to fold dough. Chloe handed out warm tart slices. Megan filled vases with fresh wildflowers. Even distant relatives like Dorothy stood proudly by my side. In the center of the room, I was kneading dough on a wide marble counter. My hands steady, my heart unburdened. And I realized something with absolute clarity. My victory wasn't making my parents regret their choices. It was building a world where kindness and passion mattered, whether they understood it or not. The sweetest revenge wasn't humiliation. It was a life fully lived, without asking anyone for permission. And the most beautiful pastry in the room was still the one I'd named after the person who believed in me first, Eleanor's garden. If you've listened to this story from the beginning to the end, tell me, did you enjoy it? What kind of stories should I create next? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the stories other women will share.